It's 77 AD. A retired naval commander named Pliny the Elder is sitting in a study near Naples, dictating to a secretary. He's writing an encyclopedia, 37 books, an attempt to catalog literally everything known about the natural world. And in book 7, he pauses on a subject he clearly finds fascinating and slightly terrifying. He writes that if a woman touches a beehive during her period, the bees will die. That she can dull the edge of a knife, turn wine sour, and cause fruit to fall from the tree above her head. He is not writing folklore for entertainment. He is writing what he believes to be established natural fact, in the single most influential reference work in the Western world for the next 1500 years. Doctors cited him. Monks copied him. Renaissance scholars still quoted him as an authority centuries later. So today we're doing Rome. What did Roman women actually use, physically, during their periods, and why did one of antiquity's most respected minds think the substance itself was dangerous enough to spoil a harvest? Let's get into it. Here's the annoying part first. Rome left us an almost unmanageable mountain of writing. Law codes, poetry, war journals, gossip, graffiti scratched onto tavern walls. And yet the actual logistics of managing a period are barely there. Not because Romans were shy about bodies generally. Their comedy is filthy, their satire is filthier, and their bathhouses were mixed sex for long stretches of the Republic. The silence here is different. Roman literature was built almost entirely by elite men writing for other elite men, in genres, oratory, history, epic that considered ordinary female domestic life beneath serious mention. Egypt's evidence survived because a bored payroll clerk scratched it onto a spare rock. Rome's equivalent clerk would have considered the subject not shameful exactly, just unworthy of the page. So once again, we're reconstructing this from the edges. Language, laundry, and one genuinely excellent doctor. Start with the word itself. The Latin is menstrua, straight from menses. Month, the same root that gives us menstruation and menopause today. No poetry in it, no religious undertone. But the concept it named didn't sit in a neutral box. Rome was obsessed with prodigies, unnatural occurrences that priests were officially required to log and interpret as messages from the gods. A two-headed calf, a statue that wept, or the recurring reports of stones raining down on the Alban Hills, which were taken seriously enough to trigger 9 straight days of public sacrifice across the city. Pliny's menstrual claims read exactly like that same prodigy logic applied to an ordinary body. Not filthy, not sacred either, the way Egypt filed it, just charged a force strong enough to reach out and affect the world around it. The same category of thing as lightning or a plague. Something you respected because you weren't fully sure what it might do next. Now, the practical question, what did they actually use? Egypt was a linen economy. Rome was a wool one. Sheep farming was enormous business across Italy and the provinces, and wool was the default fiber for clothing at every social level. Cleaned through a real and famously disgusting industry, the Fulonicae, Roman laundries where workers stomped fabric in vats of stale urine, collected from public jars on street corners because the ammonia in it worked as a cleaning agent. Rome ran an entire municipal system on recycled urine, which honestly deserves more attention than it gets. Against that backdrop, soft wool, worn, washed, and worn again, is the far more plausible answer than anything exotic, and we don't have to guess because one source tells us directly. And remember our friend cataloging dead bees and dulled knives? He wasn't the only one writing about this in Rome, and the other guy actually had patients. That source is Soranus of Ephesus, a Greek physician practicing in Rome under the Emperor Trajan, writing sometime around 100 AD. His treatise, Gynecea, is arguably the single best surviving medical text from the ancient world on female health. More detailed and more clinically careful than almost anything that comes before it. Soranus recommends soft wool, folded, for absorbing flow, and he's specific enough to matter. Not the coarse fiber sold cheap in the forum, but wool worked soft through repeated washing, the kind that had already done its first life as clothing before it got repurposed. He describes normal cycle length and variation, writing for the actual women in front of him, noting a bride anxious in an unfamiliar household might see her cycle shift for a while, and telling readers plainly not to panic over it. And what's genuinely striking is his tone. He's actively correcting the superstitions of his own era. Other writers of his time argued young girls needed to be kept from exercise and rich food to protect their fertility. Soranus dismisses this outright, arguing moderate activity is healthy and that some variation in a woman's cycle is completely normal, not a disorder to be feared. He's not writing prodigy logic, he's writing a doctor's notes from actual patients 3 generations before Pliny's book was still being copied as gospel, which gives you two Romes existing in the same century, looking at the identical biological event and arriving at opposite conclusions, depending entirely on who's doing the looking. The senator's encyclopedia sees an uncanny force capable of curdling a harvest. The physician's casebook sees a normal, variable, unremarkable bodily process that mostly needs practical management. Same blood. Completely different universe depending on whether the man writing about it had ever actually treated a patient. And here's the twist inside Pliny's own account, because it's not simply negative, read further, and the dangerous substance turns protective. He claims a woman walking naked around a field during her period will drive off caterpillars, worms, and beetles, and that the same act can dispel an oncoming hailstorm or whirlwind. He records that touching a doorpost with it was thought to guard a household against harmful magic, and that it was even used, applied topically, as a treatment against the bite of a rabid dog. So the exact force capable of ruining your wine can also, deployed correctly, protect your crops and your front door. It's not filth to Pliny, it's raw, untamed power, the kind of thing you fear and try to weaponize in the same breath, which honestly says more about Roman anxiety around uncontrolled female bodies than it does about biology. Now the reframe, because this is where it gets genuinely important. We picture a Roman woman managing her cycle the way we manage ours, a fixed monthly event across an entire adult life. That's almost certainly wrong. Roman girls of citizen families were frequently married in their mid to late teens, sometimes younger among the elite, and pregnancy followed quickly and repeatedly in a culture that placed enormous value on producing heirs. Add extended breastfeeding, which suppresses ovulation, chronic seasonal malnutrition among the poor, and an adult life expectancy shortened brutally by childbirth complications and disease, and you get a lifetime menstrual count nowhere near a modern woman's several hundred. Roman tombstones make this uncomfortably concrete. Inscriptions for women who died in their late teens and 20s turn up constantly across the epigraphic record, a huge share of them almost certainly linked to pregnancy and delivery, at an age when a modern woman's reproductive life would barely have started. Estimates land somewhere in the low dozens across an entire life, which reframes everything we just covered. A late period wasn't background noise. It was the single most consequential piece of information a Roman woman could receive about her own future pregnant, or not inside a legal and social system built almost entirely around producing the next citizen. So pull it together. First, the material was never the mystery wool, laundered constantly in an economy built for it. Exactly the unglamorous answer you'd expect once you know what Rome actually manufactured. Second, the category is the real story. Egypt filed this under purification. Rome filed it under raw, unstable power, dangerous in one hand and protective in the other, depending entirely on which Roman was holding the pen, an encyclopedist chasing prodigies, or a physician treating an actual patient. Third, don't romanticize Serenus into a modern feminist. He's still writing inside a deeply patriarchal medical tradition that frequently treated female anatomy as a lesser, colder version of male anatomy. He was simply more careful than most. And fourth, once you account for early marriage, constant pregnancy, and years of nursing, this wasn't the monthly rhythm we assume. It was a rare, high-stakes signal in a life built around childbearing. One last detail. Pliny the Elder, the man who spent his life cataloging nature's stranger and more dangerous corners, died in 79 AD sailing toward Vesuvius to observe the eruption up close, and never made it home. He spent decades writing down the natural world's capacity to threaten and astonish people, and it eventually killed him. Somewhere in that same volcanic ash at Pompeii, ordinary Roman households were frozen mid-routine laundry half done, meals half eaten. We know exactly what they were wearing. We have almost no idea what any specific woman there used that month, because nobody thought it was worth writing down for us. So here's the question. What's the one completely mundane thing about your life right now that nobody's bothering to record? That someone 2,000 years from now would give anything to actually know? Tell me in the comments. See you in the next one.